Thank you very much, William, for another brilliant and very thoughtful address, steering our party, creating the core of ideas that I think allows us to ride out the sort of slings and arrows of outrageous political fortune. I will take that as the last time I ever get applauded just for being here. Some record of achievement in future years will be necessary. Now, it's my great honour now, and I'm excited about it, to welcome to address to the conference now the editor of Spiked Online, a guy called Brendan O'Neill that many of you will be very familiar with if you watch Sky paper reviews, if you watch political discussion programmes. And he's notable as someone on the left of politics who's cast off the sort of stultifying grip of political correctness and the hierarchy of grievance of identity politics. We haven't yet got to the stage in the SDP where we do intro music to each speaker. But if we did, I think we'd have Brendan come on stage to a song by, I think, a Leeds band, actually, the Kaiser Chiefs, and I predict a riot. Brendan.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to talk about riots today, so don't worry. As we speak here today, there is a great deal of shock and even grief in woke left circles, and especially among LGBT campaigners. They're in shock because the High Court has made a ruling that they find repulsive and even oppressive. The High Court ruled this week that a woman who gave birth to a child is the mother of that child, not the father. The High Court said that a woman who was delivered of a child in the normal way is a mum and not a dad. The woman wanted to be called the child's father because she identifies as male, but the court said, nope, sorry, in this society and in the realm of reason, if you get pregnant, carry a child to term, and then give birth to that child, you are a mother, not a father. Cue woke meltdown. In the words of The Independent, this is a move that has shocked LGBT campaigners. And I was reading all this, and not for the first time, wondering if I am going mad. This is where we are now at with woke politics, with identity politics, with the eccentric and narcissistic politics of the new so-called left. We're at a situation where it is tantamount to a speech crime to call a mother, where it is shocking, according to The Independent, to say that mothers give birth and fathers do not. All that the High Court really said is 2 + 2 = 4. But apparently you shouldn't say that these days if you want to be considered good and decent and woke, if you want to avoid demonization and harassment by legions of PC warriors, you must say that sometimes 2 + 2 = 5. You must say that sometimes a mother is in fact a father. This is the case of Freddie McConnell, a Guardian journalist who is a biological female but who identifies as male. Freddie gave birth and brought legal action against the General Registrar for the right to be recorded on the kid's certificate as its father rather than its mother. And as I was following this case, one thing really stood out for me, just how incredibly antisocial it all was. Just how staggeringly cavalier McConnell and her supporters, I know that saying her is a hate crime, McConnell and her supporters, how cavalier they were about social convention, social meaning, and about the broader community itself, where words like mother and father are really important. They have real historical importance for the broader community. And if this case had been successful, it would have had some serious antisocial consequences. This would have been the first time in British history that a child had no mother, or not even the category of mother, on its birth certificate. That would have set a precedent of erasing a central community role that of mother, from a key social document, the birth certificate. If the court had ruled that an individual who gives birth can be officially registered as a child's father, it would have thrown into disarray some of the core ideas that underpin family life. It would have set an incredibly relativistic precedent. Blokes could go about calling themselves mothers. Perhaps kids could have themselves retrospectively erased from their birth certificates if they no longer identify as the offspring of their stupid, unwoke parents. And as for the recording of the sex of a child, we have to stop that too. You know, what right does a doctor or a registrar or society more broadly, what right do any of us have to tell a kid if they're a boy or a girl? So if this case had been successful, it would have wreaked havoc on society's basic ability to record facts. It would have seriously undermined our ability to record who is born, who they are born to, and also our ability to maintain the meaning of words like mother and father, male and female, truth and falsehood. And yet none of this seems to have mattered to the campaigners. Not one bit. And that's the really striking thing. All that mattered to them was the validation of an individual's identity. The validation of an individual's identity that they are male, despite all the evidence to the contrary. That therapeutic impulse, that therapeutic question of recognition for your identity overrode absolutely everything else in this case. That is apparently more important than convention, than truth, than meaning, and reality. It's the most important thing in the world. And I think this is where we get to the heart of so-called woke left politics. It presents itself as a form of leftism, but it looks to me like a celebration of extreme individuation, of epic narcissism, to the detriment of collective ideals and collective institutions. Now, I don't want to single out Freddie McConnell. I think the same can be said for woke politics across the board. It values the psychic comfort of the individual above the health of society. It treasures the self-esteem of the individual more than it does the solidarity offered by community life and all the things that solidarity requires, which is common language, common meaning, common values, and common beliefs. The woke left thinks nothing of trampling all over those ideas and institutions of the collective life. From marriage to the family, from the community to the nation, they view all of these things as oppressive institutions that are a barrier to their realization of their own self-esteem. So witness, for example, how LGBT activists, aided by virtually the entire establishment, have completely redefined the meaning of marriage by opening it up to same-sex couples. I know this is a controversial comment. I've had hate mail about it for the past 5 years. But the fact that marriage was an institution that played a very specific heterosexual role for centuries, the fact that it was the glue of family life and the glue of community life, mattered nothing to woke activists and the woke establishment. LGBT individuals' need to feel socially validated mattered more than the meaning of marriage itself. Or see how family life, and especially the differences between the sexes, the complementary differences between the sexes, is increasingly being erased by the cult of gender fluidity. That's why I think the largely Muslim protests outside Birmingham schools are so interesting. I see this as a parental pushback against woke state intervention into family life. I think those Muslim parents are doing us a favor. This is a pushback against woke officials indoctrinating children to believe that there is no real difference between gay relationships and straight relationships, and indoctrinating them to see sex as something you can change if you want to. The fact that it has fallen to Muslims to lead this charge, I think, is very, very interesting. I think it's possibly their attachment to traditional beliefs, which other communities have been increasingly dragged away from, which makes them potentially very strong allies in the collective stand against the creep of woke politics and of extreme individuation. Democratic solidarity is under assault too, not only by the woke, I should say, but by virtually all sections of the political elite. The war on Brexit, which the woke left obviously loathes Brexit with a passion, that, I think, is another effort to undermine people's search for solidarity, to undermine our preference for the collectivity of democratic decision-making over the dog-eat-dog atomization that is promised to us under the technocratic rule of the European Union. And then there's the nation. Woke leftists really loathe the nation. They see it as the key unit of oppression. They see it as the starting point of all racism, all hatred, and all fear. If you ever go to a protest these days, you will undoubtedly see that the most woke attendees of that protest will be carrying a banner saying, "Borders equals death." They call for the erasure of borders. They call for a world without nations. They sing that bloody John Lennon song, Imagine no countries, and all that nonsense. And they despise national flags. They hate the national flag. It is now a pretty risky business in this country to wave the Union flag or the English flag in particular. Emily Thornberry will absolutely sneer at you on Twitter. People will call you a fascist. This is an assault on the most important building block of collectivity and solidarity, which is the nation. Leftists, the thing that's depressing is that leftists used to understand how important the nation was. They supported national liberation struggles, they opposed foreign meddling in national affairs. They knew that democracy was only really possible within national borders. But they've abandoned all of that for the cult of self-esteem, for the politics of self-realization. In their world now, anything that stands in the way of individual validation, including the nation, must simply be removed. And I've been thinking recently, who else behaves this cavalierly towards social institutions and community institutions? Who else is this contemptuous of community life and of the nation itself? And it struck me, the answer is the capitalist class. In particular, the new neoliberal elites. These people also see community life as subordinate to their own needs. They will often abandon communities, often with devastating consequences, if their narrow interests can be better served elsewhere. They also, like the woke left, loathe the nation state. This is why the business class is so implacably hostile to Brexit. They love the free flow of finance and the free flow of labour that is facilitated by the European Union. These days it can sometimes be hard to distinguish between a woke manifesto and an HSBC advert. And if you look at... And if you look at all those HSBC adverts on billboards around the country, they're all saying Britain isn't an island, and they're all celebrating the multicultural contributions to British life. This is really just a business version of the hostility to nationhood that you find among woke people and the liberal elite more broadly. And it seems pretty clear to me, the more I think about it, it seems clear to me that far from being a new kind of leftism, the woke ideology is really the militant wing of neoliberalism. It really is the campaigning wing of the neoliberal outlook. And that is why woke activists and big business make such comfortable bedfellows, even though both will hate to admit it. It's absolutely true. Banks and hedge funds and other capitalist outfits love to adorn their buildings in the pride flag. They're always putting lesbians in their adverts. The Financial Times list of of top 100 women in business recently included a bloke called Phil. I should be more accurate. He's Phil on some days and he's Pippa on other days. And I'm not making this up. He works for Credit Suisse, and the business world absolutely love him, and they love his gender fluidity. These days, there are really only two places where you see this kind of woke nonsense in action. You see it among trendy, edgy political movements, and you see it in the capitalist elite. You see it among the woking classes, as Julie Bindel calls them, and you see it among the ruling classes. These people, these two classes, the woke and the capitalists have a shared outlook. You don't see this stuff on building sites, which I have some familiarity with. My entire family works on building sites. You don't see it on building sites. You don't see it in factories. You don't see it in old people's homes. You don't see it in Muslim communities. You don't hear about it from black cab drivers or from busy mums in Merthyr Tydfil. You really only see it in the noisy woke media, and the noisy woke liberal elite, and in the self-consciously politically correct business world. And I think it's really important that we recognize that, because we shouldn't see wokeness or political correctness or any other aspect of this so-called left as being left-wing. We really shouldn't. And we shouldn't see it as a left that we need to counter with our own better version of what it means to be left. We should see them as being part of the neoliberal drive against social solidarity. You know, they share the same outlook, it's just expressed in different ways. Both prefer the divisive dynamic of identity politics and racial politics over the powerful, scary solidarity of working class communities. Both prefer the technocratic expertise of the EU bureaucracy over the wisdom of the democratic crowd, the wisdom of the throng, the wisdom of the people. Both are obsessed with re-educating the masses. The capitalists do it with adverts. The woke do it via the education system and the political sphere. And both, this is really important, both of them despise borders. The woke left, the woke so-called left, loathes borders because they restrict the movement of people who might one day be their students or their au pairs or their cleaners. The capitalists loathe borders because they restrict the movement of people who might one day be their underpaid, exploited workers. And I think this is the best way to view the woke ideology. Wokeness makes a virtue of the atomization that is a key feature of life in capitalist society. Wokeness doesn't challenge the individuation and corrosion of solidarity that neoliberal society brings about. It repackages it as political correctness, and it celebrates it. Their flag, the flag of the woke left and the flag of the woke elite, is not the national flag, it's the pride flag. That omnipresent flag symbolizes the success of these people in replacing the collective aspirations of old with the divided, regimented, heavily policed identitarianism of today. That flag, whenever I see it, the reason I wrote a piece saying I'm sick of the pride flag is because it really brings home just how successful the replacement of national collectivity with identitarian division has been. So how do we respond to this? I think it's simple. We emphasize the vast majority of people's desire for a sense of solidarity. That's what the vote for Brexit was all about. That's even what the vote for Trump was about, and Trump is a far more complicated political figure than Brexit is. This was people looking for something bigger than themselves, bigger than the individual, looking to regain that sense of connection that people had in the past, a sense of community connection and national connection. And I think it was a very clear rebellion against the atomizing dynamic of neoliberal society and the atomizing dynamic of the so-called new left. People are crying out for a sense of connection and a sense of social solidarity and a sense of togetherness. And anything we can do to facilitate that and to strike down the atomizing consequences of life elsewhere, that will be all to the good. Thank you.